That morning was like any other as I sat in my design studio in downtown Atlanta. I am Patricia working on layouts for a client's branding project with sunlight streaming through the large windows. My phone buzzed on the desk, lighting up with a long message from my younger sister. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another quick update about her wedding plans, but something made me open it right away. The text read, "Don't bother coming to my wedding. I don't want you ruining my day." I stared at the screen, reading it several times to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. The words were cold, direct, and filled with an attitude that made it clear she meant every one of them. This was supposed to be her day, and apparently I no longer had a place in it. The shock hit first sharp and unexpected, but within moments it shifted into something calmer, something resolute. I didn't hesitate long. My fingers moved across the keyboard as I typed my reply, keeping my tone completely even. "Don't worry. From now on, we each take care of our own. The branch runs on its own. The $860,000 debt is your responsibility. Return the Tesla." I paused for a second, then added one final line. "Oh, and be out of my house by the end of this week." I hit send without a second thought. The message delivered. No follow-up. No explanation. No turning back. Before I continue my story, tell me honestly, if your own sister sent you a message like that, what would you do next? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. From those early years of adulthood, life seemed to push me into taking on more responsibility than most people my age. Right after graduating college with a graphic design degree, my freelance work picked up quickly enough to provide steady income, and before long, I became the main financial support for the family without anyone having to ask. I never minded at first because I genuinely wanted things to go smoothly for everyone, especially for my younger sister Harper, who always seemed to receive extra attention from those around her. My parents showed clear favoritism toward Harper through the more expensive gifts they bought her for birthdays and holidays, along with constant praise for even small achievements that often went unnoticed in my case. They would frequently remind me to let things slide when it came to her, or framing it as my duty as the older sibling to make room for her needs. Whenever minor disagreements arose between us, Mom and Dad stepped in quickly to smooth things over in Harper's favor, emphasizing how I should understand her position since she was the younger one navigating life. I voluntarily covered Harper's entire college tuition without ever attaching conditions, simply hoping she would build a solid future without the struggles I had faced starting out. Beyond tuition, I handled her books, supplies, and even extra spending money during those years, viewing it as an investment in our family's overall stability. Harper grew accustomed to receiving monthly living expenses from me, along with other help whenever she asked, rarely expressing deep gratitude or showing much initiative to stand on her own. She treated the support as something natural, like an ongoing arrangement that required little effort on her part to maintain. As my client base expanded and projects became more lucrative, the financial flow continued without pause. Harper would mention needing funds for clothes trips with friends or car maintenance, and I transferred the money promptly, believing it prevented larger problems down the line. When I finally saved enough to buy a spacious house in Atlanta after several years of consistent work, I invited Harper to move in with me right away so she could avoid high rent costs in the city. The arrangement felt practical at the time, allowing her to focus on her entry-level job while sharing a comfortable home. Living together made the financial help even more direct since utilities, groceries, and home repairs fell mostly under my budget, but I saw it as a way to keep family close while easing her burden. Mom and Dad called regularly to check in, and their conversations often circled back to encouraging me to keep looking after Harper because she was still young and needed guidance from someone more experienced like me. They phrased it gently yet persistently, making it clear they expected me to prioritize her stability above everything else. Over the years, this pattern solidified without much discussion. Harper rarely contributed to household expenses beyond occasional small gestures, and my parents continued reinforcing the idea that supporting her was simply what older siblings do. I went along with it all those years believing that family meant stepping up without keeping score, even as the balance shifted further in one direction without anyone seeming to notice. The dynamic felt sustainable back then, rooted in the hope that one day Harper would find her footing and things would even out naturally. About 1 year before the wedding, everything shifted in a way I did not see coming at first. Harper suddenly announced her engagement to Nolan Burke through the family group chat, posting a photo of the ring, with a short caption that caught me completely off guard since she had never mentioned dating anyone seriously to me in person. The message landed during a busy workday, and my initial reaction was genuine happiness, mixed with surprise, because she chose to share such big news impersonally instead of calling or stopping by. I replied right away with congratulations, but her response was a simple thank you emoji that ended the exchange abruptly. In the weeks that followed, Harper's responses to my texts and calls grew noticeably shorter, often limited to a few words or emojis, rather than the longer conversations we used to have about daily life. When I asked how the proposal happened, she texted back, "It was perfect, just us," without offering more details or inviting questions. She stopped volunteering stories about her weekends or work, answering with vague replies that closed off further discussion before it could begin. Whenever wedding topics came up in passing, Harper started repeating the phrase, "my wedding, my decisions," whenever I offered suggestions or asked about plans, making it clear she wanted full control without input from others. One evening, over the phone, I mentioned a venue I knew from a client event, and Harper cut in quickly saying, "Thanks, but Nolan and I already have ideas we love. This is my wedding, my decisions, okay?" The tone carried an edge I had rarely heard from her before, leaving me quiet on the line for a moment. I still agreed to cover the majority of the wedding expenses without pushing back, even as the requests for deposits on venues and vendors kept growing larger than initially discussed. The amounts added up quickly with each new email from planners or links to inspiration boards she sent, but I transferred the funds promptly to keep things moving smoothly for her, telling myself it was a one-time contribution for her happiness. Harper began prioritizing opinions from Nolan and her newer circle of friends, frequently mentioning how they helped choose color schemes or guest list ideas, while rarely looping me in on those choices anymore. During a quick coffee meetup, she suggested Harper showed me photos of dresses on her phone and said Nolan thinks this style is best, and my friends agree, without asking what I thought until I brought it up myself. Updates about progress arrived sporadically through group messages or social media posts that everyone else saw at the same time I did, reducing the sense of closeness we once shared. The shift felt gradual yet unmistakable, as Harper leaned more toward building her future with Nolan consulting him on every detail, from invitations to menu options, while my role seemed to shrink to handling payments. Conversations turned surface level, focused only on logistics when absolutely necessary, rather than the excited sharing I expected from someone planning such a major event. I noticed how Harper deflected personal questions with quick changes of subject, keeping things light and wedding-centered whenever we spoke. At that point, the growing distance between us became impossible to ignore on a daily basis, though I chose to stay quiet about it to prevent early tension. I told myself things would settle once the initial excitement wore off, and that stepping back might give her the space she clearly wanted. Deep down, the change stung more than I admitted to anyone, but confronting it felt risky when everything still appeared headed toward a positive outcome on the surface. The emotional gap widened quietly with each passing month, setting a pattern I could feel but not yet name. A few months before the wedding, the exclusion became more concrete in ways that left little room for doubt. I stumbled across an email confirmation for a high-end venue on the outskirts of Atlanta that Harper had already signed and put down a substantial deposit on all without ever running it by me, even though the payment came directly from my account. The contract details showed dates locked in, along with custom add-ons I had never discussed, making it clear decisions were moving forward independently. When I brought it up casually over text asking how she found the place, Harper replied Nolan's cousin recommended it, and we loved it immediately. Don't worry about the details. Harper scheduled multiple dress fittings and meetings with the wedding planner alongside Nolan. Yet not once did she extend an invitation for me to join, despite knowing I was funding the bulk of those expenses. I learned about the appointments only afterward through casual mentions or photos posted online that tagged everyone else involved in the process. On one occasion, when I asked if I could come to the next fitting, Harper texted back, "It's getting crowded with my bridesmaids, so maybe next time." The response felt polite on the surface but carried a finality that discouraged further questions. When the topic of budget overruns finally came up during our only direct conversation about costs, Harper responded firmly on the phone, telling me I appreciate the help, but you shouldn't get too involved in the choices. This is my vision, and Nolan agrees we need to stick to it. Her words landed with a certainty that ended the discussion before I could express concerns about the escalating numbers. That brief exchange marked a turning point because immediately afterward, Harper removed me from all the planning group chats and stopped forwarding vendor quotes or updates that previously included me by default. The guest list discussions, menu tastings, and decoration selections continued without any input requested from my side, even for elements I had agreed to pay for upfront. Harper would share excitement about new ideas with others, but those conversations no longer reached me directly. I felt the role of primary financier being dismissed, entirely treated as an expected resource, rather than something tied to meaningful involvement. The contributions seemed taken for granted, with no expectation of gratitude or collaboration attached to them anymore. Harper proceeded with confidence in the arrangements, assuming the financial side would handle itself as it always had in the past. When another large invoice arrived for lighting and sound, I transferred it quietly, but the pattern reinforced how my place in the process had shrunk to purely transactional support, while emotional investment shifted elsewhere completely. Nolan's influence grew visible in every shared update, from theme selections to timing decisions that prioritized his family's preferences over long-standing traditions I thought might matter. I began pulling back further by limiting my own questions about progress, responding only when directly asked, instead of offering thoughts unprompted. Protecting my emotions meant creating more distance, avoiding situations where the lack of inclusion would sting freshly. The realization settled deeper that being sidelined was not accidental, but deliberate, leaving me to process the shift alone, without confrontation. The emotional gap widened quietly with each passing week, building a quiet resolve I had not felt before. One late evening, after a long workday, exhaustion pushed me to finally face what I had been avoiding for weeks. I sat down at my home desk and pulled out the thick folder holding every wedding contract, each one listing me as the sole payer responsible for the commitments. The pages felt heavier than usual as I spread them across the surface, reviewing clauses and totals that had grown far beyond original estimates without much explanation along the way. I opened my banking app next and began examining statements for the secondary credit card I had added Harper 2 years earlier, along with the joint checking account she still had access to for convenience. Transactions loaded one by one, mostly routine at first, but patterns emerged that made my focus sharpen immediately. Large charges appeared repeatedly to various online sports betting platforms, amounts that started small yet escalated quickly over months into sums I could not ignore. The losses accumulated across multiple apps, showing consistent deposits, followed by rapid withdrawals that left balances depleted time after time. I cross-referenced dates and totals, watching the numbers climb steadily until the full picture revealed a debt reaching $860,000, spread through credit lines and personal loans taken in ways I had never authorized or known about. The realization settled coldly as I calculated how long this had continued right under my nose, while I remained focused on work deadlines. Shock gave way to a need for clarity, prompting me to schedule an urgent appointment with my lawyer, Glenn Harvey, the very next morning. In his office, I laid out the contracts and statements explaining the situation without emotion, while he reviewed everything carefully. Glenn confirmed quietly, "Since all agreements list you as the only signer and funding source, you hold complete authority to modify or cancel them without legal repercussion from other parties." He added that the vehicle purchase and any joint accounts followed the same principle, allowing full reclamation on my side alone. We discussed penalties and timelines, noting most vendors included cancellation clauses with fees ranging from 10 to 20% manageable compared to the alternative of proceeding. Glenn advised documenting every step for protection, emphasizing that acting promptly would limit exposure further. The conversation lasted less than an hour, yet it shifted something fundamental inside me as facts replaced uncertainty. Driving home afterward, the decision crystallized without drama or anger, simply a firm commitment to safeguard my financial stability and future from risks I no longer chose to carry. Years of enabling had reached a natural limit, and protecting what I built became the priority over preserving appearances or avoiding discomfort. The resolve felt steady rather than sudden, rooted in evidence rather than resentment, guiding my next moves with clear purpose. I spent the rest of that evening organizing files digitally and physically, preparing for actions that would follow soon. The weight lifted gradually as control returned to my hands alone, replacing vague worry with practical focus. No illusions remained about changing anyone else. The change needed to start and end with me. 1 week before the wedding, I moved forward with the plan in a way that felt methodical rather than emotional. I started with the main venue and largest catering package, picking up the phone early in the morning to speak directly with the coordinator who had handled the booking. She sounded surprised at first when I explained the need to cancel, reminding me of the non-refundable deposit and penalty clause, but I confirmed I understood and accepted those terms as outlined in the contract I had signed alone. The call ended with her promising to send formal confirmation and invoice for the fees within the day. Next, I contacted the imported floral service that specialized in the elaborate arrangements Harper had chosen months earlier. The representative expressed disappointment about the rare blooms already ordered from overseas suppliers, yet processed the cancellation smoothly once I referenced the exact clause, allowing termination with a fixed penalty. Similar conversations followed with the professional photography team and the live band booked for the reception, each vendor accustomed to last-minute changes in high-end events and requiring only basic verification before agreeing to release the date. I drove to the official dealership that afternoon to handle the Tesla Model Y purchased as a gift but still registered solely in my name. The salesperson recognized me from previous visits and appeared confused when I requested to halt all customizations and reclaim the vehicle outright. He checked the paperwork quickly, confirmed no title transfer had occurred, and completed the reversal paperwork without further questions, while I waited in the showroom. The keys returned to my possession before I left the lot, marking one more item resolved permanently. Back home, I logged into the banking portal to close the joint account Harper had access to for years, initiating the process that required only my authorization as primary holder. The remaining balance transferred instantly to my personal account, leaving no shared funds behind. I reviewed statements one last time to ensure every pending charge cleared properly before finalizing the closure. Finally, I composed a formal email to the wedding planner, overseeing the remaining details, attaching electronic signatures, and referencing all active contracts by number. The message stated clearly that the entire event was canceled, effective immediately directing any outstanding invoices or refunds to my attention alone. The planner responded within hours, acknowledging receipt and confirming she would notify all secondary vendors to stop work. Every step unfolded over just a few consecutive days, with minimal discussion or resistance from the parties involved. Vendors processed requests efficiently focused on their standard procedures rather than reasons which allowed the unwinding to happen quietly and without confrontation. The penalties added up to a manageable sum compared to the full commitments and documentation arrived promptly for my records. The process left me tired from constant coordination, yet relieved by the regained control. Acting decisively brought a sense of order back to finances that had slipped too far for too long. No announcements were made to anyone else. The changes simply took effect behind the scenes, while life continued normally on the surface. 2 days before the wedding, the fallout reached Harper and Nolan in ways they could no longer ignore. Major vendors forwarded official cancellation emails and letters directly to both of them since their contact information appeared on secondary paperwork, shaking the entire plan to its core as key elements vanished overnight. The messages detailed penalties already processed and dates released, leaving large gaps in what had been a carefully scheduled event. Harper started receiving persistent calls from collection agencies, demanding payment on overdue credit card balances and personal loans that had fallen behind. The callers referenced specific accounts and amounts, pressing for immediate arrangements while threatening further action if ignored. The volume increased throughout the day, interrupting attempts to salvage alternative options at the last minute. Backup venues and smaller services, Harper approached for emergency replacements, ran standard credit checks as part of their booking process only to decline new contracts once the sharply lowered score appeared in reports. Representatives explained politely that company policy required certain thresholds for large deposits, effectively closing off quick fixes that might have patched the holes. Nolan confronted Harper directly about the financial situation after receiving his own copies of cancellation notices from suppliers who had communicated with both of them. He asked pointed questions during a tense conversation, seeking clear answers about debts and decisions made without his full knowledge. The discussion revealed pieces of the truth that shifted his understanding of their shared future plans significantly. Harper tried reaching me through every available channel, sending texts, voicemails, and messages on multiple platforms pleading for explanation or reversal. All attempts bounced back or went unanswered since I had blocked contact completely following my final reply weeks earlier. The silence from my side remained absolute, leaving her messages unread and calls diverted automatically. Leila Fuentes, Harper's cousin, phoned me unexpectedly that afternoon with a tone that mixed hesitation and concern. She shared details about a previous relationship where Harper had similarly accumulated debt through betting and hidden it from her partner at the time. Lila explained how the ex discovered drained accounts shortly before their planned engagement ended, abruptly drawing parallels she could not overlook now. The call provided confirmation from someone outside my immediate circle, reinforcing patterns I already suspected without adding new anger on my part. Lila spoke quietly, mentioning family gatherings where Harper boasted about financial security that never materialized independently. The conversation ended with her expressing regret for staying silent longer, though she asked me to keep the source confidential. Meanwhile, the wedding's collapse accelerated as word spread among mutual contacts who received updated information from confused vendors. Nolan's questions grew more frequent, focusing on how long the issues had persisted and why they surfaced only under pressure. Harper's responses became defensive, struggling to maintain the narrative of control she had projected for months. The rapid unraveling left little time for recovery, turning what should have been final preparations into damage control. Calls from agencies continued into the evening, each one underscoring the immediate consequences of unpaid balances. The reality settled heavily without any buffer left to soften the impact. A few months after the wedding that never happened, life settled into a rhythm that felt calmer and more authentic than it had in years. I continued living peacefully in the house in Atlanta, now truly mine alone, without any lingering financial obligations to anyone else. The space no longer carried echoes of shared responsibilities or expectations, allowing routines to form around my own needs and schedule. My freelance design work flourished more than ever, with renewed focus and energy that came from cleared distractions. Clients increased steadily as I took on larger projects, and my personal finances strengthened quickly once the old burdens disappeared entirely. Savings grew again, without unexpected drains, providing security I had almost forgotten was possible. Harper received the official eviction notice once the sublease agreement tied to my name ended, formally requiring her to vacate the property she had called home for so long. The process followed standard legal steps, giving her the required time to arrange alternative housing elsewhere. Nolan chose to end the relationship completely after grasping the full extent of the debt issues and patterns of deception that had emerged. With no remaining support network to cover the obligations, Harper eventually filed for bankruptcy protection to address the massive accumulated debt that overwhelmed her options. The filing became necessary to restructure or discharge what could no longer be managed through regular payments or negotiations. The consequences unfolded realistically, reflecting choices made over time without intervention from others. I maintained absolute silence toward Harper, cutting off all channels permanently to preserve the boundaries I had set. Contact with mom and dad ceased as well, since their ongoing favoritism toward her made balanced communication impossible. The separation extended naturally to include them removing any pressure to explain or justify decisions that prioritized my well-being. Looking back, the clearest lesson is that helping family is meaningful only when it includes mutual respect and reasonable limits. Enabling without boundaries can erode self-respect and invite exploitation even from those closest to us. True care sometimes means stepping away to protect your own future, allowing others to face the results of their actions fully. No one deserves to lose their stability because love was mistaken for unlimited obligation. Thank you all for staying with me through this entire story and listening until the very end. Your time and attention mean a lot, as these real experiences connect us in unexpected ways. I truly appreciate every one of you who made it here. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done differently, or how do you set boundaries with family? Your perspectives help everyone.